Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Okay, let's kick off this episode with a big welcome to everyone who's tuning in today. We are so excited for our conversation that we are about to have with Jaime Pollack, who is a powerhouse of positive change for so many of us in the DID community. I'm going to actually ask Jaime to say a little bit about herself before we get started, for those of you who might not be familiar with her. So welcome, Jaime.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk to all the fine folks listening. My name is Jaime Pollack. I live in Orlando, Florida, unfortunately, but I am working on changing the state of Florida for the better. And in Orlando, I work as a preschool special education teacher trainer. So I was in the classroom for about 25 years, and I recently left to work for the district. And now I help train other teachers in the Orange County Public School District. And then when I'm not doing all those fun things, or with my husband or my fur children, I run this amazing nonprofit that is my pride and joy called An Infinite Mind. And we work to educate and advocate for people living with dissociative identities.
That is an organization that I can say has changed my own life for the better, and it's actually how I got the pleasure of meeting you. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you founded An Infinite Mind, why you founded it? Like, how did it come to be? What was your vision for it, and how did it get here?
Well, that's a fun question because so we're going on the organization is going on year 17. And when I started it, now we got to think back 17 years ago, what a different time we were in 17 years ago, especially in with mental health acceptance in general, but really in the dissociative identities community of what resources was available for people. And so I was recently diagnosed with DID, and I went to go find resources and things on the big wide web, and there really wasn't anything. And what I was able to find was really just for professionals in the field. It was a lot of research. There really wasn't anything out there for people who were living with it. And what I could find wasn't anything that was very hopeful or positive. So I really wanted to make a clearinghouse. Like, it was supposed to be like a static website where I would find all the positive things I could and put it on this website so I could go to it when I was struggling with accepting and working through my disorder, and that anyone else could find it and also have some hope that, there was positive portrayals of DID out there. And that's what it was supposed to be. And so we launched it, and it really got a lot of traction, and people really, really, really needed that positive beacon. And so then I was like, okay, we probably should do something with this now. So then we moved from a website, and I got like a real board of directors, and we got a real 501c3, and we kind of became a legitimate official organization. And then from there, we took a couple years to figure out what we really should do and how to best represent and help our community. Because at that time, we were the only organization that was consumer focused, that wasn't just for the professionals. So we took a couple years of planning, and then we came together and we brought the conference Healing Together into light. And that kind of was our big starting point of our organization.
For people who have never been to the Healing Together conference, I mean, it is hands down the most amazing conference I've attended, and I've attended a lot of different ones over the years of my career. Can you tell people, like, how would you describe it to people? What would you say is the best part of it?
It's a very unique and special place. I don't think there's anything like it anywhere. We're going on next year will be year 15, I believe, already. So it's been a while. And it's really like a homecoming. That's the best I can describe it every year. It's like a big homecoming where you can come exactly how you are and how you want to be, and you're 100% accepted and appreciated and valued and respected no matter what your journey is or where you are in your journey or what it looks like. Even some people over the course of the weekend might be on a big journey, and it doesn't matter. We're all here to support everybody. It's just this magical place where you can come with no masks and just be completely accepted for 3 straight days. It's beautiful. So you really leave with a great sense of community, and a lot of people make some of their best friends there. We've had people meet their spouses there. And then, when you leave, not only do you leave with a great sense of community and all of these newfound friends, we also provide a lot of educational sessions. So you're able to learn new tools and techniques and tricks and life hacks to living with DID or supporting someone who does. Or if you're a clinician, learning how to best treat your clients. So it's kind of like an all-inclusive setting where everybody is welcome and everybody will leave with ideas and ways to continue their healing or help who they are working with on healing, and then best friends that you can continue to have support you as you go. It's so beautiful. I absolutely am very proud of what we created, and look forward to it every single year.
It's an amazing experience. I'm going to add something to what you said, which is it's also a really safe place.
Yes.
So for people who can come and be themselves, especially, well, I mean, especially everybody, but I know that clinicians in particular are always worried about their confidentiality, their personal experience, and there's a lot of controversy around that. But it's a place that if you're a clinician and you have dissociative identities, you can come and be yourself with a lot of other clinicians who also have dissociative identities. You're not the only one out there who is dealing with this and living in multiplicity. So that's a beautiful thing.
It is. And we do have special like breakout groups for those clinicians who live with dissociative identities. We have a lot of different breakout groups for people to connect with. And then also going back to the idea of safety, yes, we are very big on safety. We on purpose picked a location. Unfortunately, it is in Florida right now, so that's not great, but we are in a very liberal part of Florida, thankfully. But our location is secure. There's only one way in and one way out, and you can't get in without proper ID. So we keep it very secure and safe. We're very proud of the fact that the board of directors, with us, myself and 5 other amazing humans, we are hands-on. We put that conference together. It is not done by event planners or outside services. Our hands are in every piece of it. So we make sure that every step of the way, our attendees are thought about and reflected upon, and their needs and their suggestions are taken in. It isn't some outside person or someone we hired that's putting it together. So we take great care and effort into making sure that every aspect of it is the safest it can be for our attendees. And we also include a lot of grounding activities. There is a grounding room that you can kind of go into. There's a sensory area. We have like an art area. So we do make a lot of effort to make sure that even if you are there and you start to have a hard time, that there is still support for you while you're there.
I recall too that in some of the sessions, there were even clinicians available if somebody felt particularly activated or triggered by content. And that's not something that you see at most conferences. So that was really cool to see for people.
Good. Yes. We really try. We want everybody to come and be as safe as they can and feel comfortable enough.
To give people an idea, how many people attended this past year?
Well, we're hybrid. We were never going to be hybrid. We were adamant about never being hybrid because we really wanted to keep the community of people like in person so we can keep an eye on the safety and all those things. But COVID forced us to go virtual. And after much searching and much brainstorming and talking with experts, we did create as safe as we can, again, safe enough, where we can do a virtual component. So the last 2 years have been hybrid, and we were able to create a hybrid component that mimicked as much as it can the community that we try and build in person. So that being said, in totality, we had about 700, and I think 18 was the final count, 718. And we had 26 different countries represented of the 718 folks. And of the 718, about half were in person. So we had just actually more than half. I think this year we had 420 in person. So quite a few. It was the largest we've had so far.
That's incredible. I was looking, I mean, I had both experiences. So my first time attending, I was virtual and I had a phenomenal experience. I literally felt like I was there and met people that I'm still in touch with and that I actually meet with weekly,
Oh, nice.
which is really cool.
Hmm.
And they've become really good friends. And this past year, I got to go in person, and it was an incredible experience. One thing that a lot of people I think might not know about that I also think is incredible that An Infinite Mind does is, can you tell us a little about your speaker series?
Yes. So every month we have a speaker series, which kind of grew out of the conference. So um, we have these great speakers that come to the conference and you have the opportunity to interact with them and get your questions answered. So podcasts are great. Like this is phenomenal. It's a great resource. But if you have individual questions, there's no way to kind of get those answered. So we decided to kind of bring our presenters that we have at the conference and kind of do a speaker series because it also opens up more presenters who can't travel to the conference. And so once a month, we have an expert on something, whether it be their lived experience, a special strategy or technique, or whatever, their supporter, how they work through their relationships. And it's live and interactive so that you can log in and you can ask the questions and you can have access to these people that you wouldn't normally have access to. And it's just a great opportunity to build more community and connection and get some questions that you might have.
There's some great speakers too and wonderful topics. So in the show notes, we'll have the link to An Infinite Mind, to the conference, and also directly to the speaker series if folks want to just click on them directly.
Yeah, that'll be great because you can, after they're done, they are recorded. So you can go back and watch all the other ones. Of course, you can't do the interactive piece now because it's recorded, but you can still have access to go back to watch all the ones that you might have missed.
Which is great because there truly are some amazing talks in there. So I know that a lot of people that listen to this podcast, both professionals and people who live with dissociative identities, and also some of their supporters, are really curious about people's experiences, right? Because if you've met one system, you've met one system and it's always different.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can say for me, despite having gotten a diagnosis back in 92, back when they weren't treating it because thank you, false memory syndrome, right?
Right. It's a whole other podcast, right?
Yeah. It's like denial was the best route to go back then and just, do your best to function.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of, even going back to revisit it, I had been living this way for so long that I thought the voices were just thoughts. I didn't know that other people didn't hear voices. And so, like, sometimes the ways in which people describe their experiences will either resonate or not resonate with people. So I try to get as many voices as we can to just share a little bit about their experience of how basically like how you discovered that you're part of a system. Like what types of things were you experiencing that led you to eventually get the diagnosis?
A lot of things. Well, and here's the thing with that. You meet one system, you meet one system. That is true. However, there are generalizations that go across people living with dissociative identities have the same big symptoms, but the breakdown of how systems are developed and run, that is very individual to each person. So I say that because I was having the typical symptoms that you would know of dissociative identities, but I didn't know that's what I had. I knew that I had a very traumatic childhood. I wasn't one that had amnesia to my abuse. I knew I had sexual abuse, physical abuse, all the abuses. Like I knew I had it. That wasn't a surprise to me. What was a surprise was because of dissociative identities, I felt as though it didn't affect me because my outside self to the world was functional. I was valedictorian, all these things. I was super successful. I got a scholarship to college, all these things. So I was like, I'm so strong. Like, I don't know why people get so, damaged by abuse. Like, look at me. I'm like thriving. I'm awesome. Whatever. Like, I really just had that perspective of like, why is people get, I don't understand people so traumatized. Clearly, of course, it was because I was dissociative from all of the feelings about the trauma, not the memories, but the feelings connected to it. So I was able to just think logically, like, it happened, it's over, I'm in college now. But what I quickly realized when I started college was really the big realization for me, because in college, when it's less about academics and survival and making it through your day and more about having fun and socializing and learning to be an independent adult and all of these other life skills, I was like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. That's where I started to notice, like, I am not, like, people would be talking, but I wasn't processing what they were saying. Like, their lips were moving, but I was like, I'm not getting what you're telling me. People would come up to me and they would talk about things we had done together or things that I had said, and I would have no recollection to who they were. I started to have the really big time lapse in the day of like it was morning and next thing I know it's going to bed and I can't recall what happened throughout the day. So I started to have those more typical DID-ish kind of things. I heard voices, that was always the constant, but like you, I didn't think that was a symptom. I just thought that was just part of human nature. So that wasn't what drove me to therapy. Wasn't like, oh, I hear voices. I just had that looped in as one of my like things. What really drove me to therapy was the socialization piece, that I was having such a hard time relating to other people, that I was losing these big tracks of time. Once I was in college and I was kind of in a safer space away from my abusive home life, I started to then get a lot more flashbacks and panics and triggers that I never really had before, especially not even slight trigger warning, but if you're listening, slight trigger warning. In college, I had my first consensual sexual experience, and that something about it being consensual really tripped something up in my brain and was like, oh, we remember this. And it just like unlocked something that was locked. And it really sent a spiral into all of the more typical symptoms that I thought I was so strong, like I don't have them. I had them. And so I started to really have some functionality issues. And so then I started to go to therapy, and that's kind of what started this journey. But then it was still another 10 years before I got a DID diagnosis.
And that's fairly typical, right? But I think it's 6 to 10 years is average.
Yeah, 8 to 10 years. And that was for me. Well, also, this would have been 1994, and I was diagnosed in 2003. So, no, 2004, somewhere in that. Yeah, 2003. So, must have been around that 10-year period. That sounds about right. And this was like, you have to like think back of what the life was like back then. There wasn't internet. There was no Google.
Right.
There was nothing. Like, I'm old, so I would have to go to like a library and go to the filing system and find the little index card with the Dewey Decimal Points and find the one book the library might have had in it. Like, there wasn't access to all the resources. So I'm going to therapy, so I don't have access to look up my symptoms. The therapists don't have access to really like ask other clinicians and go online and do all these things. It's whatever they were taught in their schools. So when I would go to these therapists with the same set of symptoms, I really personally believed I must have like ADD, because that was a big thing back then. Oh, I must have ADD, the time loss and not remembering what people said. I must not just remembered meeting these people who say they know me, and all of that stuff. But my symptoms that took me into therapy was the time loss, the inability to connect with people, the triggers, the panic attacks, the nightmares, all those typical trauma symptoms. And I would tell them, and I also hear these voices, because at some point in the earlier therapy, I realized that not everybody hears voices. That is unique. So then I say, and I hear these voices that talk to me all the time, and not anything negative. It wasn't like, paranoid type of voices. It was just constant narration and commenting on my daily life existences. I don't want to wear that. I want to eat this. That's boring. Why are we going here? Like those kind of things. But unfortunately, because I said the word voices, I was pigeonholed into schizophrenia. Forgive the pun. Multiple times I was pigeonholed into schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And when I would go to the library, get the Dewey Decimal card, pull the book, and go read what it said about schizophrenia, I would come back and be like, well, none of this sounds like me. None of these symptoms are what I'm experiencing. And I was told I saw 17 different therapists in that 10-year period. And I was told that I was in denial, that I don't have those symptoms yet because it's early enough, that I was diagnosed as shopping, why? And the hardest one for me was that I was just told I was treatment resistant. Right. So then you get these things, and then you think, okay, well, there's no hope for me now. Not even the therapist can fix me. I must be that broken that not even therapists can help me. This is a very long story made super short, but then internet came to be. And I would go to our computer lab and wait my turn in line to go for the 30 minutes of dial up. But then at least I was able to have access to more information. And then I found and I kind of knew about this thing called dissociative disorders because when I was in high school, I saw a therapist briefly and she had brought up the notion of dissociation and I kind of brushed it off. But then I was like, oh wait, when I saw it on like this internet, I was like, oh, this therapist told me about this one time. So then I started to check out the books in the library on dissociation. And I was like, okay, this feels more accurate. So then I looked and found a dissociative therapist and made a special appointment with her. And then finally, I remember it so clearly. It was in 2003, so it was a long time ago. But I remember so clearly sitting in her office, and when she did her intake for the first time in all of my years of therapy, the questions she was asking made sense. It was like, oh my gosh, yes, we're now finally speaking the same language. You were understanding me. Like I'm not trying so hard to explain what I'm experiencing. And the question she was asking was like, yes, oh my gosh, yes. How do you know that? Yes, that too. Like it was such a relief to be like, oh my gosh, you totally get it. And then she's like, yeah. And then after, of course, a few sessions and some more evaluations, she's like, yeah. So here's what you have. And that was the change of my life that day. I mean, it was a very hard day. That's how I finally learned that I was DID.
I'm thinking like, thank goodness you met that person.
Oh, a life changing. Well, actually, what really is, thank goodness, goes back to the therapist that I had when I was 17. And that was in 93. So that was way before anything. And I still talk to her to this day. And she had just like 2 months before I came into her office taken a training on dissociation because it was in South Florida and they had a big clinic down there at the time. And she had just taken it. And so had she not even told me that this thing existed, I wouldn't even known to look it up. But because she had planted the seed when I was 17, that dissociation was a thing. So when I finally got access to internet, I was able to, oh, right, this dissociation thing. That's what she told me. And that's how I read more about it and was able to. I don't know if my brain would have stopped on dissociation when I was Googling. Well, I don't know if they had Google back then, but when I was looking up things, if it would have clicked on dissociation had I not already heard that word before.
I'm thinking about the ripple effect too of, your that first therapist giving you the name of the, sort of the category of disorders, and then you doing the research, finding the right type of therapist who gives you the diagnosis, who then catapults your life into a different space, which then literally births this whole organization that now impacts like thousands of people at this point. That's pretty amazing.
Yes, it's crazy. Right. It's such a great butterfly effect, right? And that's why I reached out to her when I started the organization. We started to grow. I was like, you won't remember me. And she actually did. She did remember me. And just because I wanted her to see like what her impact had and how for the clinicians who are listening, you don't really realize the impact you have. I mean, she had just taken a training and she only mentioned it to me because I was in denial that I had any problems because I was so strong. And I was like, I don't have to talk about my trauma. Like, I'm fine. It doesn't bother me at all. Like, everything is great. And then she was like, there's this thing called dissociation. And I was like, I'm just so strong. But like, yeah, like that one little thing you don't realize when you're a clinician, or even like I'm an educator, even when you're a teacher, how one little thing can not only change that person's life, but can change a lot of people's, good and bad. So you really have to be careful, very mindful. I mean, if I would have stopped with schizophrenia and started taking the medications they wanted me to take for schizophrenia, I could have a whole different life right now too. So, you just have to be mindful when you work with people who are in a vulnerable state that you really try hard to do the best you can.
This is where if you're a provider, consultation is really important, and not just consultation from one other person, but consultation from multiple other people
Yep.
in order to really sort of figure things out, especially if there's any semblance of confusion.
Yes, 100%.
It's so important. A lot of people, like literally almost everybody that I've talked to, is really interested in the concept of internal communication. And it's different for lots of people. I mean, it's similar for many people, but it's also different.
Right.
Some people seem like they've always had it. And some people have known about their diagnosis for a decade and they're still trying to get it, and everywhere in between. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit about what your experience with communication internally has been like. Was it something that came really easy for you in your system? Was it something you really had to work at? Where kind of like, where are you at now?
It was both. So I always knew we were a system. I always referred to myself, even when I was little, as a we, that I always knew their names. They were like my imaginary friends. And then in all of my art and journals before I was diagnosed, they're in it. I just didn't know that was a unique thing to me or being DID. I just thought everyone thought plural until I realized you don't. I went into therapy already having pretty good conversations with myself, like the parts of me. Like there were some that I hadn't met yet, and we had to kind of teach them the internal communication piece. But thankfully, we were very well aware of pretty much everybody for the most part. And so we didn't have that challenge of self discovery in that way. The challenge that we had for me and personally in my system was learning to communicate effectively and respectfully. So that was our biggest challenge, was because nobody for so long DID was missed, that when finally they were like, thank you, you see us, almost like we're here, you can actually see us. And then it was like this explosion of, now people can hear me, and now let me get all of my talking done. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Ghosts. They have a UK one and an English version, like American one. Anyway, they're ghosts and no one can see them. But when the person has a near-death experience, suddenly she can see them. And for the first couple episodes, they are so excited that she can see them that they overwhelm her with just wanting everything. Like, now that you can hear me, I haven't smelled bacon in 10 years. I haven't watched this television show. I haven't called my mom. I haven't. And it was just, I want to watch this on TV. Can you put this computer on? Because finally somebody could do what they've been missing. And that was kind of the same thing that happened with me. Like, once the therapist knew they were there, and then I knew that they were there, and it weren't just other voices. Like, once the light was on, it was just this rush of constant, not fighting, but trying to be the loudest voice so they can get their needs met the most, and sabotaging the other one, and so that this one can get their needs met over this one. And then and the communication was there. The organization of the communication took quite a bit of time.
That makes a lot of sense.
That was hard. Yeah.
When parts realize that they can't do everything on their own and just kind of go rogue, and that there needs to be some kind of collaboration in order for things to work well.
Yes. Yes. And then you have, of course, in all systems, like, this is when I say systems are the same, but they're different. Systems are very unique to each person, but they do have the same general parts. Like, we have child parts, protector parts, social parts, a little different. And so when you have a protector part who's trying to keep you safe, and then you have another part who wants, now, well, I can go online, I know how to use a credit card and then you get internal fighting. That's like, so then you have the protector part fighting with this internal part. And so, there's just all of that internal dialogue and arguing, and you're sitting out there just trying to, like, listen to your therapist talk or watch TV, and in your head it's like, you can't order 5,000 things from Amazon. Yes, I can. I want that. You can't tell me what to do. And you just sit on the outside and smile and nod, like, I'm listening to every word you're saying. I'm ignoring the war that's going on in my brain right now. So, it's that, everyone has to kind of work together. It's so hard. It's so hard.
Did you find a mechanism for being able to communicate? In other words, like, do you have system meetings for yourself? Because I find some people have them, some people don't. Some people communicate on the fly. Some people do a combination.
All the above. So earlier on, initially we communicated through writing and art. That was the easiest way, because I found that it took me, Jamie, a long time to figure out how to hear them without losing time out here. So that was hard for me, because I found that if I'm like, okay, what do you want? Then it would be 3 hours. Like, I couldn't figure out how to stay co-conscious and present at the same time, if that makes sense at all. So we started doing writing, because with writing, I could stay present and I could read what they were writing. And so it made me stay connected better. As we practiced in therapy, the strategies and ways to be able to, for me to stay present and hear them talking to me, and that once we got past that and we were able to all hear each other, and then we started to make like conversation rules and have our meetings, and then we developed the meeting. So earlier on in therapy, our meetings were quite argumentative and challenging. But as we learned to respect each other, and mainly as me, as I don't know, the host or the, whatever, but me, the more I learned to give them what they needed and listen to what they needed, that much easier life became. So when we have our meetings, we, like, for example, this morning we had a meeting and the little one really wanted chocolate bananas for breakfast. And I was like, you know what? Chocolate bananas for breakfast it is. And normally it would have been like another part being like, well, that's not healthy. And man, that's going to give us diabetes. And this one's going to be like, well, that's not going to give us protein that we need for the gym later, like all the different arguments. But because we know now that this is how we have to function, no one really argued it. We're like, fine, chocolate bananas for breakfast it is. And so you can have your protein with lunch because we're going to go to the gym later this afternoon. So both. We have our meetings and we kind of talk about things. And then also sometimes it's on the fly.
Yeah, some people will say, I don't know if this is part of how your system also makes determinations around what you do or don't do. Like I've heard folks say, if there's a part that's asking for something and it's relatively easy to do and there's really no harm in it, say yes.
Right. No, that's exactly what it is. Like there's no harm in having a chocolate banana for breakfast.
Right.
Right? Like, is that really going to make or break my entire day? No. But listening to my little part cry for 2 hours because she didn't get her chocolate banana would.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not harmful. It's not worth it. Like, don't sweat the small stuff kind of a thing.
Right.
And then if there is something that's a bigger issue that needs a bigger conversation, then we'll have a special meeting and we'll have a sit down and a powwow about it. And then if we need to, we'll call in the therapist and have them provide some perspective. For the most part now, because it's been so long, I mean, now I'm going on I can't do math, but 2003 to 24 is a 20 something years, 21 years.
Yeah. Yep.
We've gotten pretty good at it. So we do have a lot of experience and practice now. I mean, it wasn't always this easy, but it's just because we've done it now for so long. It just is almost second nature that we know we're not going to argue about this or that or whatever.
Which I'm hoping brings a lot of hope and inspiration to people listening, because, when you're at the beginning or like even in the middle of the process and you have all of these parts that want all of these different things and you're making lists of what everybody needs and you're trying to figure out like, I can't do all of this in a day. I'm not even sure I can get it done in a week and still, function in the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is a testament, right? That it gets a lot easier and it gets just to be part of your day.
It really does. And I will say, like, it does take a while because your parts need to know that you hear them. Mm-hmm. So, like I said earlier with the whole ghost thing, like at the beginning, they were just so excited that the requests were outrageous and never ending. Once we got past the initial rush of, I want this and this and this and this, and they really understood that they were going to be heard and their requests, as long as they were reasonable, would be accepted. It does get easier. The requests get less and less, and you learn to start like just incorporating them into your day-to-day life. So it's not so much like, this one loves coffee. So, all right, when we're by a Starbucks, we'll pull in and get coffee. And so it doesn't make as much noise, I guess, anymore, because I know them and they know each other and we all know what we need. So it just kind of becomes second nature. So it's a lot quieter. It does definitely get quieter and more fluid and more natural to just know what they need or want or don't like or do like. Or
I'm curious if you have any, I'm just going to call them words of wisdom for people who are maybe just getting the diagnosis or who have had it for a long time. I feel like denial can be a really big piece in the diagnosis. Like,
oh, it sure can.
Right? Like you can have moments where it's quiet. You're like, I just make all this up, or am I creating all this? Or am I fabricating all this or whatever?
Yep.
And that can get really disruptive and really disconcerting. And it can also like throw the parts themselves into a huge tumult, or, there's all sorts of stuff that can happen related to that. Do you have any words of wisdom for people that are really kind of wrestling with denial?
Well, denial is a real thing. And I did the same stuff. I did the same. I don't really have this, or like, yeah, you said it's quiet. So I don't have it. I was just pretending, or I don't have the real true DID. I must have like DID light. Like I really struggled a lot with what it meant to have dissociative identities and what that meant for me. So yeah, denial was real. And what I've learned, I think, through my denial was when I stopped denying is when I made huge progress. And I'm really pleased for our community that DID, not in the general community, but in our mental health trauma community anyway, that DID is much more accepting now, because I think that would have helped my denial, because I didn't have any models or images to look at to say, oh yeah, they're like me. There was literally nothing that looked like me, which made my denial even worse. So if once I started to find people who looked like me, I was like, okay, so it isn't as bad as I had perceived it to be. You can be successful and have DID. So I don't have to be in such denial and hide this so much and fight this so much, because it's okay. And once I really came to terms with it's okay that I have this, I mean, my therapy took off so quick from there. And I really got so much better, so much more quickly, because I was stopping, I was stopping the fight against the disorder and the diagnosis, and just embracing it and embracing my parts and being like, all right, team, this is who we are. We're just going to figure this out and let's just do this together. And that really shifted for me. But the denial was strong for a long time because, like I said, I didn't think I could have a successful life with the diagnosis. I didn't think I was going to be able to live functionally with the diagnosis because, there was no images. So back when I was diagnosed, because when I kept getting told I had schizophrenia, they would tell me, well, we caught it early enough, but soon you're going to have all of these problems. And so in my mind, I thought the same way with DID, that maybe I'm not, I'm super functional now. I'm finishing my master's degree. I'm working on my specialist degree. Like I have all this great success in my life. But now this is just the start of where I lose everything, because I didn't see anything positive. The only thing in the media and the news at that time was Sybil, Eve. That was really it. There wasn't anything. There wasn't anyone. Robert Oxnam, who became my mentor, didn't come out for like 3 or 4 years into my diagnosis. So I just believe like this is the start of the end. And so I couldn't, I, I just couldn't get there. I couldn't get there. But once I accepted it, I'm like, this is what it's going to be. It definitely got better. And I can tell you like words of wisdom from someone who's been 20 years plus now in this therapy is that it definitely gets easier. It's super hard. I'm not going to lie and say like, it was an easy journey. So once I accepted it, it was great. No, once I accepted it, I stopped fighting the diagnosis, and then I had to do all the healing and the trauma processing and on and on and on. And it was super, super hard and intense, but it was 100% worth it. I would, I mean, I love the life I live now.
When you look back, and I mean, realistically, I think so many of us are just in and out of therapy, right? Throughout many years. But when you look back, or even today, or wherever your journey currently is at, what are some things, I guess, that a therapist has said or done that you've found to be the most helpful in your journey? Is there something that stands out to you as like, that was really, really helpful?
Yes. Well, in general, before I was diagnosed, what was helpful was listening. I think even if those therapists that I had saw, and there were a couple of bright spots in the mix of the 17, they weren't all terrible, but the ones that were the bright spots knew nothing about dissociation and trauma, nothing at all. But they tried. Like they did take the time to listen and understand and look in their DSMs and whatever research you could do back then, and they tried. They really tried. So they were helpful in what they could do instead of just trying to push a diagnosis on me and brush me off as treatment resistant and not difficult to work with, and really try. And that is what was appreciated. So but if you don't know anything about it at all and you just listen to your client and be honest and say, I don't know about this, but we can explore it together. And then that was comforting. And I stayed with those therapists like over a year and a half, just because I felt like they were a teammate. Like they weren't helping me a lot other than giving me general coping skills and like grounding techniques and the basics, of the, the level 1 therapy of just the survival. They weren't actually healing and treating anything, but that was helpful in itself. So I appreciated that. Just that listening and doing the best you can, not just trying to diagnose. Once I was diagnosed, I think what was super helpful through the process of healing, and I have been through several, is the openness of my clinicians to look at other options and allow me to explore them. Because there isn't a one box fits all treatment plan. And so the original therapist that I saw was amazing, but her theory and approaches weren't what I needed. And so she was very kind and like, if you want to try and see if someone else has a different strategy that might work better. So I did, and I found one that specialized in art therapy, not the trauma art, but the drawing art therapy. And she specialized in that along with sand tray and play. And that was more up my alley. And so then I switched over to her, and we did a lot of great work using hypnotherapy and sand tray and art and all the like expressive types of therapy. And then when we felt we did the best that we can, I said, you know what, think I want to try EMDR, because it just started to come out and we were hearing really positive things about it. And like the national trainer for EMDR and DID happened to be in Orlando, like the expert of them all. So I'm like, let me go see him. And so I did. And she was I think that's a great thing to transition into. And so then I tried some EMDR. So I think that, like, don't take it personally. You reach what you can do, the best that you can do. And then at some point you say, all right, maybe we got to try something different.
That's actually also really great advice for the client, right? To listen to yourself. If something isn't feeling quite right, it's okay to go look and see what else is out there to see if there's a better fit.
Right.
And you might find yourself kind of going back and forth, like what's not working right now may actually work in a couple of years. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
If you're open to it.
Right. Like I could never have done EMDR early on. EMDR only worked for me because when I finally got to that state, I was way down my treatment. So I had very good internal communication. We knew what we were doing at that point. We had all of our grounding skills. Like we were in a space where it was ready to work. So yeah, I mean, if I had looked at EMDR earlier on, it would have been like, it's a mess.
So for everyone really listening, the kind of underscore and highlight of just orienting skills to being in the present day, so you're not swallowed up by history, is really important to be able to get through.
Yes.
And helpful for the parts, right? For them to know what's happening today.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, for educational purposes of any clinician that might be listening, and also probably for validation of many clients that might be listening or people living with dissociative identities, has there been anything that a therapist or provider has said or done that has been particularly unhelpful?
Well, yeah, similar. I mean, I think I kind of touched on it on the last thing. It's just not listening to your clients, just thinking that you know everything and that this is what it is, and being very adamant, and then putting the blame on the client. Like, I'm not a clinician, so I can't speak of that, but I am a therapist for children, and I do special education with a lot of behavioral support. And if the children aren't responding to my intervention, it's not the children's fault. I need to change my intervention. And I feel like it's the same for clinicians. And a lot of clinicians that I saw that were harmful really put the blame on me of being a difficult client or being treatment resistant or being in denial, and didn't take the opportunity to think, well, what else can I do? And I think that is dangerous in general, DID or otherwise, that you don't know everything and you never will. And I do want to say, and I don't want to make this about therapists being therapists knocking by any means. Therapists are amazing and they saved my life. And even if you don't know about trauma or DID or dissociation in general, and you get that client in your door, don't be afraid to refer out. Or if you already have a relationship with that client and you've been seeing them for all this time, and then you discover together that, oh, they might have this DID thing, and that bond and relationship is already there, then get consultation. As you said earlier, there's plenty of resources now, that there's so many resources now that there was not back in the day, that you have access to so many brilliant minds who can help you help this client. Because really, as everyone who's a clinician, and you of course know that the relationship between the therapist and client is critical in anything, above and beyond whatever treatment method you're going to use. So if you have that connection, then be honest and say, I don't know, but we're going to figure this out together, and get yourself some great consultation, and get moving and learn a great new skill for you. I mean, I think we had a beautiful speaker at the conference, I think this year. I don't know if you heard, and she was a therapist for a long time. And she had a really great bond, and a client came in and discovered she had DID. And she's like, I guess I'm going to learn something new. And she dedicated all her time to doing every training and consultation. Now she's an amazing clinician.
That's the best advice. If you're working with a client and you have a good relationship, the relationship, it really is the vehicle for healing. So getting that consultation is really important. And I can make sure that we have resources for consultation for providers and even for clients. If you can also request that your provider get some consultation.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get some more information about, how your therapy is going, it's very normal and very okay to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
And a reminder to providers, right, that what you said is so true. There's no provider on the planet that can know everything. And a client not progressing is not necessarily anyone's fault. It just means that there needs to be another set of eyes and some more ideas for paths to explore with the person. And as providers, it's important to not take things personally. Somebody not getting better is not necessarily a statement that your skills suck.
Right.
That's not necessarily it. And a lot of people take it that way though, right? And so that's where you start hearing things like, this client is treatment resistant. This person doesn't want to get better. I mean, I certainly had those things said to me in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't have anything to do with my level of motivation. It had a lot to do with the level of just disorganization I was living in a system that didn't work together.
Yes.
And in a time too where providers, I think, were very afraid to treat. Along the same lines, the reality is, right, there are a lot of different things that people can do to support themselves in healing. And while many people are in individual therapy, there's a lot of things that support healing. I'm wondering if there were other things that you did, parts of yourself did, whether that's things like energy healing or yoga or meditation or body work or anything along those lines that you did that might have been supportive.
Yes. And I think that's a great question, because I do want to touch on the fact that I know that I am super privileged. Not only was I born the right color, I mean, the wrong gender, I guess, but the right color. And, I have access to therapy that a lot of people don't have access to. None of my therapy took insurance, but I was fortunate enough to be able to work, that I was able to self-pay for my sessions. And I live in a community where I have access to a variety of clinicians. So it is a great idea to also look at what other options are available to you if you don't have the privilege of finding a therapist or being able to work with one. And if you do, ways to support outside of the hour or 2 hours you're in the office. So for me, my body and my system in general, but who I am, really responds to movement. So I did trauma-informed yoga, like it was specific yoga for trauma, and I loved it. It was very somatically based, which wasn't a big thing at that time, but now the big thing is somatic. But then it was just trauma yoga. But being able to move the energy out of my body in a focused way was super helpful to get that anxiety out and those like stuck feelings out that felt like they were like living in my bones. I don't know how else to explain it, but I just felt like they live inside of me. So the movement of the yoga was super helpful. I got massages, which took me a long time to build to be able to tolerate a massage. I mean, that was a whole journey in itself of just my head, just my shoulders, then my eyes opened, and then, my clothes still on, the whole thing before I got to a better place. But I found a trauma sensitive massage therapist. And so that also helped kind of calm my body and help my nervous system kind of get to into a more regulated state. I also found the gym was super helpful, running super helpful. And then, I didn't at the beginning, but near the middle/end of my of the actual intensive part, I started to find a community of people living with DID. Then I'm like, oh, wait, there's more of us. Here we are. And so building that community was really helpful, and having other people who understood that I could reach out and connect with, because I didn't have that the first probably half of my journey. So it was nice to finally get to a space where it was like, oh, okay, so you understand, and I have someone I can talk to and connect with. And then I found too, Again, I'm just privileged to live in a really mental health, access area. I did join some support groups that were sexual trauma based, but not DID based. So I did like an art experience one. I did an equine therapy one with my courses. It wasn't specific to DID, but it was specific to trauma and sexual abuse and recovery in that way. So I was still able to get the benefit of it and meet some great people and some get some healing from those as well. But the true work, of course, was in my therapist's office. But all those things kind of kept me busy the other 6 days I wasn't there.
Those are great ideas for people. I definitely find, there's for people who don't have access that even doing something like being outside in nature and going for a walk can be really helpful.
The beach. I love the beach. Whenever I get super stressed, I just go to the beach and it's like
Yeah.
the best.
Something that I know comes up definitely after the Healing Together conference, but it comes up throughout the year when people are discovering things on social media about DID and realizing like, oh, I think I might actually have this. And maybe they get confirmation. And all of a sudden, and I see this in clients too, who are, they all of a sudden want to tell everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's not always a good idea, depending on who your support system is, who's in your family. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts for people about, being open about your diagnosis, potentially with friends, families, how you decide who you disclose to or who you don't disclose to. Any thoughts as somebody who is, pretty far along in the process?
Disclosure is a tough one. I mean, disclosure is really hard. And that is something that really each individual person has to decide if that's the risk they want to take with disclosure. Because it kind of depends on where you live and how educated your circles are, how accepting of mental health your circles are. And you have to really consider what the ramifications are. Unfortunately, mental health and DID does not have the best reputation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like it has a negative stigma still attached to it. So it's tricky. I was very fortunate in that from friends and from coworkers and parents of my students, because I was teaching at the time, when I did finally come public with it, I was accepted. I had no backlash. It was very well received. I think some of that had to do with how I presented it. I presented it more positively and as this cool thing my brain did, and how awesome is this thing, than I didn't come at it as a negative, like, look, what was me? Look at what I have to deal with in my life. I came with like, look at this awesome thing. So I think how I presented it helped it get accepted. Family was a whole different story. So I mean, your relationship with your family is something that you need to consider. I disconnected from my mom a long time ago because she was not a healthy person for me. But my siblings I was still kind of close with, and then coming out really publicly with my DID kind of had a major effect on that. So, you have to kind of really, I didn't realize it and I still would have come out, but when I share my story, I'm in essence sharing theirs, and they weren't ready for that level of publicity. So it got a little sticky family wise, don't share our family secrets everywhere kind of a thing. And so, I mean, you really have to consider all things. You have to consider your job and what you do and whether it's worth the risk. And if there is negative connotations, are you okay with dying on that hill? Like I will lose, like if they fire me, that's fine because I believe in this mission enough. You kind of have to weigh it for yourself. I was just very, very lucky, and I know not everyone is as lucky as I was. So I can't really give much.
That's great advice, truthfully. There's a level of excitement, I think, when people come together and they meet other people who have the same diagnosis, especially for the first time. And you're like, my God, I'm not the only one. And you really understand what my life is like. And I'm starting to appreciate the creative aspects that come with DID and OSDD and the, sort of superpowers that come along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to share it. And the rest of the world isn't necessarily there yet.
Right.
And making sure that you are in a position of at least relative safety is pretty important.
Yes. You definitely have to be strong enough and confident enough in yourself to be able to take any negative feedback you might get, to be able to be enough to say, I still love myself and I don't care if you don't accept me. I'm still great how I am.
That is pivotal. I think it was it Eleanor Roosevelt who coined that phrase, like what other people think of me is none of my business. It's very helpful.
Yes. Yes, exactly. You have to be able to have that to be like, oh, I don't care. Because I got to that space where I was like, when I became public, and in my mind, I really did think parents were going to not put their children in my class at that point. And I was like, I told my principal, because I told her first, and I said, and let me back up. The reason why I told so many people was because I had the organization. I was very public. All you had to do was Google my name and you were going to find out. And I didn't want my principal or someone finding out by just a parent calling and say, I Googled your teacher and blah, blah, blah. I had a great relationship with my principal. My past principals after her, I didn't tell them, but for her, I wanted to have that conversation. But anyway, I really thought parents are going to pull their kids out when they start Googling my name and say, oh, look, she's the DID. I'm not putting my kid in her class. But then I told my principal, I said, look, my class always has a wait list. So if they want to pull their kids out, that's fine, because there's many other kids who want to come in. So like you have to be in that space where you're like, if you want to judge me as a parent and pull your kid out of my class, that is fine. But there are 12 other kids beneath them that want that same spot. So, bring them on, bring them on in. And so, I mean, I don't know if any parents pull their kids out of my class on the list for that reason, but my class was always full and I never heard a complaint. So I'm going to assume no.
Sometimes I think for people who already have an identity outside of their diagnosis, where you're known as a great teacher or you're known as a great fill in the blank, whatever your profession is, or a great student, whatever,
Mhm.
sometimes I think that can soften the impact of disclosure a little bit, because you can point out like it doesn't impact my ability to fulfill whatever duties I have. And you've been watching me do that for years. Now you just have an extra piece of information that you didn't have.
Yes. So true. And I feel like for me, it felt like I don't feel the need now to prove myself. If I was earlier in my career, I would have felt this pressure to be the best teacher because I have to override the DID piece. I have to prove that I can be this great because I have DID. But because I was already so great, in essence, that, like you said, it was already another piece. So I didn't feel the pressure to even have to justify anything.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I was just weighing that against, the pressure to perform and the pressure, like the imposter syndrome thing that can also happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to navigate.
No, it is not. But that's why we continue to do the hard work, right? So that people coming after us will have an easier time.
Yeah. One thing that I think is really important for people who have DID and OSDD is navigating not just mental health, but health care.
Yes.
So, needing to go to any type of annual exam, regardless of your gender, can be incredibly triggering, can be really challenging between the power differential and the physical exams or whatever it is.
Dentist.
Advice for folks to navigate that as best as possible.
Yeah. So here's what I had to do, because Trigger City, the OBGYN and the dentist, holy dear goodness gracious. Even the eye doctor is super hard. I actually hit the eye doctor my very first time I went. I punched the eye doctor. He's still my eye doctor, though. He forgave me. It took a while. What I really had to come to terms with, okay, well, it's two layers. One, I had to get to a place that's in my system, first of all, that we are in a space where we knew how to keep each other safe and who can go to their rooms and who needs the breathing and who can listen to their music. Like we had to have all of that in place, too. So let's start there. Like that was a big deal. We had to have the system in a space where they knew how to protect each other and what they need to feel, not triggered. So there's that.
Work on your inner world.
Right. But then the outer world, what I do have control of. So I heard somewhere, someone had told me that I am hiring this person. I don't work for them. They work for me. So why am I not treating it like a job interview? Why am I just accepting like you're the doctor, so I'm going to go to you? I'm very, again, privileged. I have insurance. I have plenty of options for OBGYNs and dentists and all the things. So why am I just randomly picking someone? So I started interviewing OBGYNs and I said, who's the most trauma informed? And then I said, I had a list of questions. I would call the practice and I would say, I have sexual abuse in my history. May I please come and see the space and meet your provider before I make an appointment? And the ones that said no, I never called again. But there were several that said yes, of course. And so I knew already I'm walking into more accepting space. And then, so for the 2 or 3 that said, yes, of course, and they can bill insurance for it, it has a special word, but it is billable through insurance. I went and I met the provider. I was able to talk to them about what I needed for my safety. I saw the space, I met the staff, and I picked the one that I felt the most comfortable with. And that's how I kind of initially found my OBGYN. And then it's in my notes when I get there, like, I need this, I need my lights on, I'm gonna have this stuffed animal, I'm gonna have these headphones. And like, if these are my code words for when I need you to stop, this is like, everything was in place and we had the conversation. So it was still tough, but at least I went in feeling so much more in control, because I knew that she knew. And then if I put my thumb up or my thumb down, or if I did this or that, like, all that stuff was already taking place. She already knew what I needed. I needed the lights low. I needed her not to talk to me during it. I needed my music play. Like, so it helped. And then having a system that knew how to navigate it, like, okay, these parts need to be away. These are the parts that can be present. It was the same thing that I ended up doing to find the dentist that I currently see. It was the same process. I met with them. I wanted to meet with her, and she's been phenomenal with me. And the same thing. I saw all the tools. We made our signals. We did all the things, and so it gave me a lot less anxiety going in, knowing that I had full control, and that one of the big things for me was that if I had to stop, that they wouldn't be mad about it. Like, if I say, okay, I'm done, that's all we can do today is just this part, and then have to come back and finish the next half another time. I wanted them to know that was okay, because I didn't want to feel pressure to have to keep doing it because they'll be mad or whatever. And they're like, nope, you stop, we'll make another appointment and we'll do the next half. So having all of that control was so helpful. And if not, then you're fired and I'll find somebody else, because I'm paying you a lot of money, or my insurance company is anyway.
Some really great ideas there,
Yeah.
because it is so hard to navigate that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And for many people, you can have some of the best coping skills and they kind of all go out the window in those moments.
Yes. And it included, I didn't tell them that I had DID necessarily at the beginning. My dentist actually does know that I have DID now, but I did include in those conversations that are in my notes, what if something goes wrong? Okay, if this goes south and I start to look like this or act like this, I didn't really want to go into what DID was, but like, if I start talking this way, or behavior starts to come, here is what you can do. Here's the phone number call my husband, play this song. Like, I really ground. For me, my biggest grounding skill is certain songs and sounds on my phone and images on my phone that are related to today. So I say, here's my phone, play this song, show me these pictures, talk to me about my dog, ask me questions about my husband. And like, I gave them like the list, like, these are the things that you can do that will bring me back and ground me back to now. And so I think that is also really helpful to have in place. Like, if I do get triggered,
Yeah.
pull out this sheet, and these are the things to do on this sheet that would get me back grounded. And if they won't do that, then find yourself somebody else.
That preparation beforehand can be so incredibly helpful. And hopefully people are also taking note of the fact that there's a little preparation you have to do before the preparation, right? Like,
Yeah,
practice using your inner world and practice figuring out how to have parts go places that are safe, so that more, sort of grown up or adult parts can take care of things that are more grown up in nature, right?
exactly.
And also the importance of knowing what works for you in terms of grounding and orienting back to the present day.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go in somewhere and you just have a list of random grounding skills that maybe somebody handed to you, but you've never used them before, the likelihood of them working in that moment is pretty low.
Yes, 100%. And I don't trust when they say they're trauma informed. That means nothing to me.
I agree.
Don't, even if you call and they say we're trauma informed, no, that means they took a video class for 2 hours on a Saturday. That means nothing.
And yes, I 1,000% agree. And a lot of times that video class on a Saturday, all it says to them is vast majority of people have higher ACE scores and everybody has some type of trauma, but that doesn't necessarily translate into practice.
Yeah, right. And patience and tolerance and acceptance.
Yeah. I had a doctor who said that they were very trauma informed and very knowledgeable. And in terms of saying what they were going to do before they did do it
Hmm.
was helpful, but this was the same doctor that came up behind me and wrapped her hands around my throat.
Oh yeah, no, see?
Like,
Oops.
it did not go well, you know?
No.
And I get, that like logically,
Huh?
she was just doing a thyroid exam, which was unnecessary because I happen to have an endocrinologist, but that is not a trauma informed action at all.
Right. See? Uh-uh. And then they'll, they'll say, I'm sorry. I'm like, it's fine, but just you should be mindful that I mean that and that's how I did my massages at first. I found a really great massage therapist and I told her, I said, before you move to any other body part, I need you to verbally say out loud, I am now moving to your right foot. I am now moving to your left foot. I'm like, okay, so I won't be like startled by the sudden touch in random places. So no, it's you have to. They don't know, and they don't. And even if they did know, it's not fair to expect them to know every person's individual
Right.
triggers because, as you already just mentioned, and as we found, even at the Healing Together conference, even though we try so hard to be as safe as possible, people's triggers are so connected to their experiences. You can never know everything. So no matter how trained you are, you don't know. We had someone who was triggered by butterflies, and the whole conference is butterflies.
Oh, yeah.
That's everything. I mean, right? Butterflies are the healing symbol for so much. And so I was like, well, you don't know. So you just can't assume like I have this beautiful office and there's butterflies on the wall and it's beautiful. Well, not always.
I think that's also a really important reason why knowing what's going to help you reorient is important because sometimes you don't even know what your own triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense when you think about how the brain works in trauma, right? If the hippocampus is tasked with tagging memory and context, it downregulates. It doesn't tag very well.
Right.
So yellow shirt might be one of your triggers, but it's completely irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily know until you're in the presence of a particular yellow shirt and are kind of off. But if you have the ability or knowledge of what grounds you and brings you back, you can navigate it pretty well rather than, potentially having some big problems for a long time after.
Absolutely. I always carried, and I still do for the most part, but like a little bag of grounding things. Like I had the standard stuff like a smell and whatever, but I had things that were very specific to me that my therapist had attached to me. Like when you feel like through hypnotherapy and like, visual imagery, like when you rub this rock, you're going to remember sitting at the beach and you're going to remember the smell of the salt water and you're going to remember the whatever. And so I had this little bag that had like a rock in it that had the smell of one of my caretakers who was very nurturing and kind to me growing up. I found her perfume and I had a smell of her perfume in there, like things that are very specific that whenever I did see a random thing that all of a sudden was like taking you out of your body for just a minute, I like find my bag and there are pictures in it. Now I have my cell phone for that, but there are pictures of things, like I said earlier, like my husband, my dog, my nieces, things that really were like, oh, look at my dog. Oh, there's my, like, it kind of like, oh, look at my cute niece smiling in that picture. That kind of, kind of takes you back to now. And
Helps a lot.
mm-hmm, so much.
Do you have quick tips or maybe not quick tips, but tips for folks who support people who have DID?
I do. And my biggest tip is take care of yourself first. I think, I mean, I can give you a bunch of ways that you'll be able to help your loved one, but that I think is only going to be possible if you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I see it within my own spouse and I see it in the spouses of my friends and not even spouses, partners, children, anyone who's really caring for, loving for someone who has DID. What I really want them to understand and know is that your experiences matter too. I hear a lot of, well, it's nothing to what it's nothing to what you went through, but it's nothing to how you feel. It's nothing to how you, I don't care. It's not a competition. Your feelings are still valid. And even if it wasn't as bad as you perceive it to be, that my experience was, you still are allowed to have bad days. And like, you still are allowed to be frustrated with my DID. And you're still allowed to be angry about my DID and be angry at the person who caused my DID. Like I felt so much that my husband felt like he had to stifle all of that because, he had to be the supporter and the strong one. And I'm like, no, you're allowed to have feelings about this. You can love me and support me and not like that I have DID sometimes. Like it's okay. And I want supporters to understand that you can love the person and support them and be angry about components of their trauma and their abuse or their system.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
And know the Healing Together conference is a resource for you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a whole supporter track and supporter groups and supporter sections because yeah. And if you are a spouse, there are some pretty unique challenges of living with a system, especially intimacy. That's a whole other podcast, probably. And so it's important to have your own network and your own community of support to be able to ask those questions to and to vent to and to share positive things that you figured out too. That aside, the other best way to support your person with DID is to love them and listen to what they need. And that's really it. You don't need to, I wouldn't want you to be a savior and feel like you have to be their therapist or anything. Just be there for what they need you to be.
That's some pressure.
And for each person, that'll be different. Right. Well, I think and some people take that pressure on. Like they feel like I have to fix her, or I shouldn't say her, I have to fix the person and I have to fix this, or I need to be the strong one. Or no, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't have to be that. You can help them find someone who could be that. It doesn't have to be you.
If you had the opportunity to kind of go back in time and have a conversation with the version of you that basically sought therapy and was like, these are things that are not going very well for me, and maybe I'm confused, or whatever those thoughts were that you had at the time, what would you say to her today?
Well, that's a deep question.
Sorry, sometimes the therapist part's just not there.
No, it's fine. It's great. It's a great question. I mean, I'm trying not to be too cliche about it, but it gets better because it does. But what I would say to her, really, and I have in essence, in therapy, because that part of me still exists inside, is it's not, don't, I know cliche, don't give up. It does get better, but I want to acknowledge her and her tenacity to keep fighting and searching and finding the right answer. I know it was hard and that every clinician was telling us that there's no hope for us and that we're treatment resistant and that we're schizophrenic and we're all these things. And that for whatever the reason, she never gave up trying to find the right answer. And I just want to tell her to keep fighting, and your future self appreciates how hard that you were fighting, that you didn't just go with the first diagnosis, that you kept looking and you kept searching for the right answer, because if it wasn't for the tenacity of that 17, 18, 19-year-old, we could have a whole different life right now. And so, I mean, yes, it gets better, but it gets better because she didn't give up and she fought hard and kept trying to find an answer. So I would tell her, thank you, really. Just thank you for that. That's what I would say. Thank you. Give her a big hug and how much I appreciate that, because it was hard. It was really, really, really hard.
I love that.
But for some reason, there was always a hope that there was something that we were missing.
Yeah, the resilience is really amazing when you think back
Mm-hmm.
or look back, right?
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a DID trait.
Acknowledging that the Healing Together Conference is the #1 resource
Yes.
for folks with dissociative identity disorder and OSDD. What are some of your favorite resources for people who are multiple?
My other favorite go-tos are System Speak. They have some amazing podcasts on there as well. And they have a community that they're building, or they've built, and it continues to be built. And the person who runs it, Emma, is amazing. And she is great at monitoring the community and keeping it a safe space. And so I highly recommend System Speak. I also like a lot Multiplied by One, which is a newer organization, but they're coming out with some really good supports. They have like online support groups, and they have like a magazine that's coming out. And so if you need like virtual support groups, they're a great location for that as well. Beauty After Bruises, another organization that I love so much. They do a lot of really great work, so I would recommend checking them out. And then of course, like there's different podcasts and stuff of people that we listen to, like yours. And there's the Garden System, and what is theirs?
Couple of multiples.
Couple of Multiples is really great. Everything Jamie Merritt and Adrian Fletcher put out is really amazing resources as well. I don't want to forget, so I feel like I'm on the Oscars, like, oh, and I forgot to mention.
I know, right? Katie Keach puts out some great stuff too.
Oh, Katie Keach in the Plural Refractory in the Plural Association. Yes, 100%. Yes, they are phenomenal. I love all the work that Katie and her group does. The Plural Association does a great conference. I think they just had theirs as well. They're another great organization that works really positively for our community. I'm missing anybody else that I really love.
I know, I'm trying to think too.
I know. I mean, the ISSTD, I mean, they're great for trainings and some things. I wouldn't say as a multiple, I would recommend you go there as a clinician. They do offer some decent trainings and classes for you to explore. So they're an option-ish, but I'd rather you do the trainings from Jamie March first.
Yeah, Jamie's trainings and Institute for Creative Mindfulness has some really great stuff.
Yes, I would rather.
If you're a clinician wanting to get training in EMDR with an emphasis in dissociation, it's the go-to.
Yes, I would definitely lean towards those first.
Those are great resources.
Yeah, I would. Those are my go-tos off the top of my head, but I'm sure I'm missing some. And if I'm missing you guys, I'm really sorry.
We can always add them to the show notes if we think about them after.
Or add them in the chat or the list on the bottom. Yeah, we'll add them later. I'm trying to think if I'm missing any, but those are the.
Oh my gosh.
The top ones.
Thank you so much for all of your time, your openness, and honestly, for all of the lives you're changing and have changed, including mine.
Well, thank you.
Just really grateful.
I'm grateful to have you part of our community.
Oh, thank you.
You're a great voice for us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's fun to be more out there and to be able to bring folks some varied voices through just this venue. It's kind of fun.
Right. And it's great. And it's what we need. We're making it better for every generation after us.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And to everyone listening, we hope today's conversation was helpful. It has been chock full of ideas and resources, and we will make sure we put the links to those resources right in the show notes so that you can click on them directly. If this podcast has been helpful, whether you're someone with dissociative identities or a provider who treats them, please consider sharing it with somebody that you think might enjoy it or who might benefit from it. And as always, keep shining bright. Until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care. Nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.